Hey everybody, Mo here, and welcome to my Ezreal Karma Guide for Dummies. So, first, I want to apologize for not making a video last week. Just like most people throughout this epidemic, I've lost my job because of it, and so I've been using this time to stream a lot more on Twitch, and I've been grinding the ranked ladder intensely trying to hit rank 1. I haven't been able to do that yet, however, I did do the next best thing, which was hit rank 2 and then win 3 games before dropping down to rank 22. During the climb, I had a 91% win rate day 1, where I went 33 and 3, and then the next day I went 24 and 5, which is about an 82% win rate. And because of this success, and because I kept getting the same questions over and over again on Twitch about the deck and how to play it and what to look for, yada yada, I decided to go ahead and just make this deck guide for you guys. So, in this deck guide, I'll be covering things to know about the deck before you start playing, general tips on the deck, and then I'll get more into specific matchup knowledge, including a mulligan guide. Things to know about the deck before you start. So here are a couple things you should know before picking up the deck. First and foremost, this deck is not balanced. When put in someone's hands who knows what they're doing, this deck is just not fair and on a whole nother plane compared to the other decks in Legends of Runeterra. Every game just turns into, if the game goes to turn 10, I win, and literally 30 cards in my deck help me stall the game out until turn 10. I'm completely baffled and just genuinely confused as to why this deck isn't considered at least S tier on any tier list I've looked at. Like, I understand if people don't want to say it's the best deck in the meta because Bannerman, or if they have their opinions on where it is in the top 3 decks, but like, why is it not even being considered as one of the best decks right now when it's put under several other decks and put all the way down to A tier? The only thing I can think of is that players aren't putting in enough games and time into mastering the deck, or they just, decide it's not worth the commitment and would rather play a deck they feel more comfortable with. I know several people who play Bannerman decks or control decks just because they feel more comfortable with those decks, and that's perfectly fine. Either way, once more people start to play this deck and figure out the ins and out and start to master with the deck, everyone will understand like how just gross this deck is, and they'll be calling for a ban real quick. And it's not like this deck is brand new. This deck's been around since Masters has been around. I think the 7th guy that hit Masters played a deck almost exactly like this. Speaking of mastering the deck, this is probably the most difficult deck I've come across in Legends of Runeterra, and most, if not all, high-level players will agree that this is for sure one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult. The learning curve is really steep, and I had to figure it out all on my own because I didn't have a guide like this to learn from. So far, I've played 186 games with the deck, with a total win-loss ratio of 122 to 64, which is about a 66% win rate. Now, I didn't have a dominant performance with the deck until my last 71 games, where my win-loss record is 60 and 11, which is about 85%. So I'll use this as the point of when I felt like I mastered the deck. So if you take away the games where I've already mastered the deck, that leaves over 100 games where I was just learning the deck and played it poorly and had a roughly 50% win rate. So this guide is to explain to you guys how I turned my barely 50% win rate, 1200 masters, playing self, into an 85% win rate rank 2 NA. The biggest and most valuable thing with this deck is to know your meta. Know exactly what cards are in your opponent's deck, know exactly what you need to deal with it, and know exactly how you're going to deal with it. I'm going to go more in depth in specifics when it comes to the matchup portion of the video later. So for now, let's just use Shadow Isle and PNZ control deck for example. In the Shadow Isle PNZ matchup, there's really only 3 things that threaten you. An aggressive Spider opener with Brood Awakening, Karina, and Ledros, paired with some sort of burn spells, including Ledros getting you close enough to where they can just get excited and Mystic Shot you down, or paired with Atrocity. Since you have that knowledge, you can tell yourself, okay, so 2 out of the 3 threats don't come until turn 9. So for mulliganing purposes, it's best to mulligan against the aggressive opener since it can happen earlier. That way, if your opponent opens with it, you're ready for it and can handle it, but if your opponent doesn't open with the aggressive Spider opener, it's fine because you have 9 turns to mold your hand into exactly what you need to deal with the different threats on turn 9. That's the biggest tip I can give you guys, is just know your meta and learn your meta. The second tip is don't be greedy and don't get impatient. If your opponent is refusing to play cards, don't try and force issues by doing stupid shit like playing your Ezreal if you can't defend it and it's unleveled, or playing your Karma if you can't save it and you only have one in your hand, or just throwing out a Yone on turn 7 because you think you can hit them for 6 damage. I promise you, if your opponent's not doing anything, it's because they're saving up to either completely deal with you in one turn, or because they have several answers to any creatures you put out on the field. So just throwing your Yone out there to get eaten by a Thermogen is really just losing you 2 Ezreal triggers for no reason, and it puts your shields down for your opponent to then play their own cards safely. Because that's all your opponent is waiting for you to do, is spend your mana, so that way they feel safe to play whatever cards they need to, because they know, oh, he just spent 7 mana on a Yone. He only has 3 spell mana. He can't deal with this card, or he can't deny this now because he only has 3 mana. So just use this time that your opponent's not playing spells to mold your hand. Use a rummage. Play your Shadow Assassin, anything that can give you virtual card advantage and lead you up to your explosive turn. Don't play cards you don't have to. A really big mistake I see a lot of players do is they'll put all of their spells on the stack when they don't need to, and then they get punished for it and lose over half of their damage. People are scared of Ezreal, since they know you can win at burst speed. This means that they won't try and kill your Ezreal until you start spell slinging and putting spells on the stack. The most common thing I do is I just put 1 spell on the stack at a time, since you'll always get priority back. So most of the time, by only putting 1 spell on the stack, you put your opponent in a very rough spot where they either have to let the spell resolve and then risk dying to uninteractive burst spells, or they can respond to the spell with their own, and then they risk you just baiting out that spell, and then now you kill them on the stack. So for instance, if you have 2 Mystic Shots and then 3 Mushrooms in your hand, if you just do 1 Mystic Shot, your opponent has to either let that hit them in the face and then risk dying to your Mushrooms, or they can respond to it, which in that case, you can now put all of your other Mystic Shots or fast spells on the stack. And so it's basically a lose-lose. As long as you just don't put all of your spells on the stack before your opponent plays their kill spell. Because then they kill your Ezreal, and you just lost out on 2 damage for every single fast spell. And that's a lot of damage, and that's probably the biggest mistake I see a lot of people do. The third tip is always look for lethal. Do your math. Here's some quick maths for you that you'll need to know, and that's if you have a leveled up Ezreal and a leveled up Karma in play. Burst spells are 4 uninteractive damage. Mystic Shots are 8 reactable damage, and Get Exciteds are 10 reactable damage. Eventually, you'll just get to the point to where you look at your cards and you can say, okay, my opponent's at 12 health, I have 3 Mushrooms, he's dead. I have 3 burst spells, my opponent's at 9 health, he's dead. I have 1 Mystic Shot and 1 Mushroom in my hand, my opponent's at 12, he's dead. You know, at this point, I've played so many games to where I just look at my hand and say, how many burst spells do I have? It doesn't even matter what the spells are. I just say, how many burst spells do I have? What's their life total? Okay, I have lethal, I don't have lethal. And this is just a little tip here, so that way you don't have to think as much for the damage. You can just write it down somewhere. Now, finally, the part most people care about, and it's how to mulligan and play versus each meta deck. Now, for this, I'm just going to look strictly at every deck that's on the Mobalytics tier list, since it'll cover basically 90% of the decks you'll come across in ladder, and will give you a good enough idea that you can apply the mulligans to the other 2% of fringe weird decks that are just going to be worse knockoffs of the good decks. Now for this, all I'm going to put in here is I'm just going to put the mulligan guide up here in the video, and if you guys want a full in-depth guide against each matchup, that'll be in my Discord that you can join below, and there will be a channel that has a more in-depth guide of how to play against every single matchup. So if you want the full in-depth guide of how to play each major matchup, go ahead and just head over to my Discord and check that out. But on this video, we're just going to go over mulligans. So elusives. In this matchup, I just mulligan for 4 removal spells, no more than 1 static shock, and you want to make sure you want to kill Zed on turn 3 through Twin Disciplines. So most of the time, I just kind of look for at least 1 Thermogen, and then you never really want more than 1 Static Shock. For Bannerman, it's basically like elusives. For this matchup, you're just going to mulligan for 4 removal spells and just try to kill creatures as they come out. For the Karina Control matchup, you're going to mulligan a half and half hand. You're going to want at least 1 Static Shock in your opening hand and at least 1 Thermogen in your opening hand. This way, you have an answer to the early game aggro plan if they play it, and then eventually you'll just draw into the late game aggro plan against their Ledroses, and Karinas. Indoor Spiders. Just mulligan for 3 Static Shocks and you win the game. This matchup is a joke. Burn aggro. You buy a Bible, open it, you start praying. This is your worst matchup. You kind of just mulligan for Thermogen and Static Shock and just other kill spells. And then you just pray that they run out of steam before you can win the game. And you just have to hope that you can clear the board before they get you to like 2 health. Ezreal Karma mirror match, you mulligan for Pickpocket, Thermogens, and Shadow Assassins. Pickpocket on turn 2 will never hit, but it'll at least bait out a kill spell. And if magically it does hit, you can say that you won in your heart, but that's pretty big momentum swing. And then Shadow Assassins just kind of applies miniature pressure and then also draws you a card and refills itself, which is nice. Spider aggro, unlike the previous aggro deck that I stated with the burn aggro, this one's a joke. You just mulligan for 3 Static Shocks and 2 Thermogens. Warm Mother Control, this matchup is also a joke. You mulligan for Shadow Assassin plus anything to help you draw cards. For example, Karma, Ezreal, Rummage, Chump Wumps to discard to the Rummage. And you basically just mold your hand to the perfect combo until turn 10 hits and you win the game. Noxious Ezreal Control, this is not a real deck. I've said that since day 1. I don't understand, but if you're playing against someone who's playing this deck, just mulligan for 2 Thermogens and then combo pieces, kill their Draven, and then they can't kill you before you combo off because they apply no pressure. Mage Seeker Lux, to be honest, I've only played against this deck like twice because it's really bad. So nobody's playing it. But I'd mulligan for Deny, Thermogen, and Recall. Heimerdinger Control Ducks, you just mulligan for Static Shots and Thermogens. Mid-range Frostbite, you mulligan for 4 removal spells. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. I stream on Twitch every day as of right now. I do 2 streams a day. One stream where I play meme decks and just joke around. And then one stream where I try and climb ladder to get back to rank 2 and eventually take BBG's spot at rank 1. I put out YouTube videos. I'm going to be more consistent with that now that I have hit rank 2. And go ahead and join the Discord below. Like I said, if you want more in-depth matchup guides, and if you just want more notifications on things. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and that's going to be it, and I'll see you guys next time.